Hi folks, it's Russ again, and we're having some more Daisy Lever gun fun, and this is one that I thought you might want to take a look at in its raw state. I just acquired this gun a few days ago, and it was nothing but one big pile of rust. So I took apart what I could, and I used a little bit of Evapo Rust, which is a non-toxic compound which it actually helps dissolve some of the rust so we can see what we have here. Once I was able to get an identification on the gun, I looked up the information. It's pretty old. It's a Plymouth, Michigan gun. I looked it up in Gary Garber's encyclopedia of Daisy Plymouth guns, and Gary does a great job documenting so many things about these guns, and I was really fortunate to be able to get one of the last remaining copies through the efforts of my son and of course Gary. So what I wanted to show you is this particular gun. Here's the receiver, and it looks slightly different in profile from a lot of the more modern or other type of Daisy guns that I'm used to working on here. And I couldn't find any identification on the receiver itself. No roll stamping and so forth, which I didn't expect to find because I identified the gun as being a number 195, model 32 if I was reading everything in the book properly, Buz Barton Special. It was only made between 1932 and 1933. The identification on this gun is on the top of the sight tube. This sight tube goes on the back of the gun like this. There's little notches here, and there's a little exploded area here. So that fits in tightly. This hole in the back lines up with the stock mounting hole on the top of the receiver. And all the information about this gun is right here on the top of the sight tube. So often you see these guns with that sight tube missing because over the years I guess they either get taken off or people lose them, or maybe they get dented, and so they just take them off because they can't see through them any longer. Now if you look in here, let me see if I can, you see that little hole? That hole is a rear peep sight which lines up to a post sight. Let's see if I can move this around. Under the hood. Let's see here. You can just see it there. There we go. Under that front hood. So what is the identification? Well, it may be a little hard to pick up on camera, but it says up here, number 195, the fancy script Daisy right here. Patents, and there are all the patent numbers. Others pending, which is something they commonly did whenever they had some variations that they were going to use. It says Daisy Manufacturing Company, Plymouth, Michigan, USA. Unfortunately, these lighter roll stamps over here are somewhat obscured by the pits that were in this metal. Whoever had this gun did not take care of it. For a gun that old, why, you would think, it would be in better condition. But whenever it lays in the water, lays in the mud, I actually, when I was cleaning out the inside of this shot tube, you couldn't even see the peep sight in there. I pulled out mud. I pulled out pieces of debris. I pulled out a cocoon, a real cocoon, and it was just a mess. So this gun has had a hard life. Somebody had a lot of fun with this one. How this one is made and loads, let me show you something. We were lucky that the shot tube was actually in as good a condition as it is. How it loads is like this. It's a little more unusual than some of the others. This little hump here, let me see, this little hump right here goes into a notch inside of the front of the barrel. right about like that. And that hole is a loading port. You lock it in place, closes the loading port. You open it up, and now you can load. In the open position, you don't have to screw this out. In fact, you're not even able to. Whenever I first had my hands on this, I had to use a pair of pliers to get things loose enough to be able to come out. But it does slide out. And the port down here fits in against the abutment inside. So this is surprisingly straight. And I don't know if you can see too much in there, but let me see. Surprisingly straight, and it is clear. Did have to brush it out. This gun was made with a cast iron, a flat-sided cast iron lever. A little bit different shape than we're used to seeing on most of them. But because of the variation of how this was built, this is the plunger. Now the plunger looks like it's pretty hard right here. It's got even more pitting than we saw on the outside because it had been waterlogged, I'm sure, and probably packed with mud, and for many years just sat there. One thing that you'll notice is the length of this does look short, and it is. This is the spring that came out of it. And we took a tape measure and put it on there, and we'll call it about a 6-inch spring. But look at the warping in it. It's really bad. Here's a spring from what we're used to seeing, the usual size. It's just over 7 inches. But this does have about 22 and a half twists to the spring. So what I may do is take a heavier spring out of one of the other guns, and if I decide I'm going to try to resurrect this and actually make it spit BBs again, I'm going to have to modify a spring, I think, to get in there. We're lucky that the diameter is the same. It's still 1/2 inch, so it'll fit that. Another thing that you'll notice is a little bit different. The trigger. This is the trigger from this particular gun, this 195. It does have the rolled over metal configuration, but this is the ones we're used to seeing, like out of your wide frame daisies or some of the other older daisy narrow frames that only have a one-piece trigger. So this is a little bit different. You can't interchange them, so I was glad to see that this trigger was still in good shape. Now, if you're going to put this on the top, you might think to yourself, how do you ever get that spring retainer to go in there and not hit the bottom of the sight tube? Well, it's just like this. Here's the hole for it, and you see how it's cut into a saddle? They have this fitted in such a way that whenever you drop that in there, make sure you're, whoops, let me get it in front. You get that in there, make sure it's down all the way, and the bottom of that saddle is just about flush with the top of the receiver. So whenever you tuck this in place, it sits right on top. Nice little design. But you can't take a standard spring retainer and slide it on there. It just won't work. This, pretty common for back in the day. They used a leather seal on there. I know we're going to have to fabricate something to get that to work properly, but it's a challenge. If I decide to go ahead with this project, I think I'm going to have to give a little TLC. We're not just going to throw it together. I'd also like to, instead of trying to make another stock, I'd also like to use this one. It looks like a piece of driftwood, and well, it should after what we've seen with the rest of the gun. What I may do with this is pack a little bit of adhesive down into the cracks on the back, and this crack goes all the way through both sides. In fact, it kind of hinges itself. I don't know if you can see that, but it spreads. So what I may end up doing with this is pinning it. I don't want to have anything showing from the top. So if I go ahead with this project, I'll glue that, I'll clamp it, I'll probably throw a dowel up through the top on an angle, and then I'll alternate angles with 2 more dowels coming through here. And I'll be able to make them flush with the inside of the groove, so they'll be less noticeable. We're not going to be able to get rid of that, and to tell you the truth, I don't want to. If we're going to stay with the rest of the parts of the gun as they're originally made, I might just clean this up a bit and hang on to it the way it is. We'll see. If nothing else, I've got some great parts here I can use on some of the other guns that need repaired. But this one is almost teasing me, saying, I dare you to make me spit BBs again. And we just might. Oh, one of the other things about this, most of the stocks we have on some of the newer guns are 7/8 of an inch thick. And that's pretty common, and it's been common for a long time on a lot of the daisies came out, especially post-war. This one, if you measure this off, the gap in here is 3/4. So if I did have to make a stock, I probably could use a piece of common lumber and I could cut it out and fit it. But as I said before, it wouldn't be original. And there's enough of the original material here that I shouldn't have to do too much fabricating to get things back together if I care to. Otherwise, the parts are here, and it has the makings of a gun. Well, that's everything for now. This is Russ, and don't forget to subscribe. Like to hear from you. If you have any ideas, just leave a note, and I'll get back to you. Take care.